Hi everyone! This week we're getting into ideas about fractured identity. You were asked to read a short chapter from a book published in 1995 and to watch a YouTube video that came out just this year. We'll talk first about the book chapter and then about the video. So let's get started. Question 1. What does Turkle say about how identity changes in the age of the internet? I'm actually going to start this question by talking a lot about Turkle. You only had to write a couple of paragraphs about this question, but because Turkle's text is so dense, I'm going to spend a bit of time here in case you found the chapter a bit difficult to get through. Just to provide a bit of context, the chapter is chapter 1 from Dr. Sherry Turkle's book, Life on the Screen: Identity in the Age of the Internet. Dr. Turkle is from MIT and she's a sociologist and clinical psychologist, meaning that she actually works with clients as well as doing academic research. Dr. Turkle's project is primarily one of figuring out people's relationships with computers, but we're reading her for the things she has to say about identity online. Keep in mind that Turkle's book was published in 1995, and the interfaces she describes on 90s era Macintoshes and Windows machines just don't exist today in that same way. Turkle talks about graphical user interfaces, or GUIs, as a new thing, but they've been the norm for so long now that you may have never had to interact with a command line machine. I've never had to, at least not to operate my computer. I have used command line as I'm trying to learn some programming, but that's a different story. Before GUIs, command line was just how you interacted with a computer. Turkle uses the experience of playing games online using MUDs, or multi-user domains, to talk about how identity changes in the age of the internet. I'll talk about MUDs a little bit more in a second, but from what I understand, the experience of playing a MUD was a bit like playing an MMORPG or massive multiplayer online role-playing game today. Turkle uses two terms that you may or may not be familiar with depending on what other classes you've had here at the University of West Florida. She uses them to discuss identity. She talks about modernist and postmodernist notions of the self. The word modernist refers to a strain of philosophical and literary thought that conceives of selfhood, or the sense of self, as a singular entity, one that may grow and develop over time, but one that's essentially stable and singular. Modernism means other things too, but that's the most important thing for our discussions this week. Postmodernism just refers to the strain of thought that came after modernism. That was basically a reaction to those ideas. Postmodernism says that, well, no, my sense of self is not singular. It's fractured and fluid. What do I mean by fluid? Essentially, it's the idea that I simultaneously inhabit multiple selves and that these selves can be very different, and aspects of these selves can even be in conflict with each other. It's not just that they can change, it's that they do change depending on a number of things. The postmodernist idea of identity that Turkle is talking about in this book also contains the idea that I construct these selves in different spaces, both physical and digital, using language and other symbol systems. It'll be important to keep these concepts in mind as you continue to work on your video essays analyzing an online identity. But for now, let's talk about question 2. Turkle uses the somewhat outdated metaphor of MUDs to describe identity in the age of the internet. Try to come up with a better metaphor for today. You could have come up with a number of other things, but here are a few ones that I could think of. Browser tabs and/or application windows. So there's this idea of multitasking and that you can be doing different things in many different tabs, portraying yourself in many different kinds of ways in each one. But perhaps a more precise metaphor would be the use of multiple social media outlets. I can say with confidence that I don't enact the same personality on Twitter that I do on Facebook. There are different audiences there, and I want to portray myself differently to those two different groups of people. That doesn't mean I'm lying or that I'm being fake on one platform versus the other. I just show different sides of myself to different people. All right, let's move to question 3 and Lindsay Ellis's video about manufactured or manufacturing authenticity. So what does Ellis mean by manufactured authenticity? In this video, Ellis analyzes the relationships among YouTube as a medium, labor, and capital, or money. Essentially, she talks about how one of the big premises of YouTube as a medium is that anyone can upload content. And if anyone can upload content, there's supposedly more authenticity to this content. People can just film their daily lives and just be themselves, but on the internet. Except, as she points out, everything, and I do mean everything on the internet and in other media as well, is curated. It's created by someone. There is an editing process, and even if not an extensive editing process, there are choices to be made about what even to film. There's always intentional choice involved in putting something on the internet. It's actually kind of similar to something Chomsky says about the news, that part of the propaganda function of the media that involves which stories they choose to focus on and which end up on the cutting room floor. Ellis says that because authenticity is supposedly a big part of the draw of YouTube, there is an onus on creators to perform that authenticity, to perform this emotional labor of curating a version of themselves that seems authentic. She goes into several details about this labor and talks about YouTube creator burnout as related to the difficulties of managing this labor. All of these pieces of her argument are important, but I want the biggest takeaway here to be that idea that all media is created, curated, and so that authenticity is curated as well. All right, last question. How does manufactured authenticity relate to visual rhetoric, multimodality, and Turkle's discussions of identity in the age of the internet? And it's maybe going to sound like I'm a bit of a broken record here, but one of the relationships between these issues are about choices and the fractured nature of identity. Just because an identity is curated doesn't mean it's fake, but it is, again, curated. The parts of ourselves we let people see online are always curated. We make choices when we post or create online content, but those pictures are never the whole pictures of ourselves. And they're fluid and they're fractured. And again, it's important to keep these things in mind as you move forward with your video essays. It's okay, a good idea even, if you want to rework some of your video scripts to incorporate some of these ideas into the essays. But that's it for now. I'll see you soon.